Thanks everybody for joining us. This is Ovations' first webinar. So yeah, I think we're all quite excited to do this with you guys. Some of you are old customers of us, and there might even be some brand new faces or people joining us for the first time. So it's very nice to meet you all in this webinar. We have today with us Andrew from IBM that's going to assist me in this presentation, and we'll do the more formal introduction shortly. But just in terms of some housekeeping, this is a Teams session, so most of you are familiar with Teams. And I think what we can do is you can, as we go through the presentation, if you have questions, please post them in the chat. And then after the presentation, we'll deal with all those questions as far as we can. If it's a very complicated question that requires some time to answer, what we'll do is we'll maybe arrange a one-on-one session with you guys, but we will try and get to all questions in some way or form. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's see if I can drive this thing to the next slide. Right, so yeah, Andrew, as I said, is from IBM. He will be helping me in this presentation today, and more specifically in the second half. And Andrew, I'm just going to give you a minute or two just to introduce yourself.
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Nico. I hope everybody's keeping well, and as well as can be. Yeah, I guess by background, I'm the IBM South Africa Automation Sales Lead. My background is across years of open source and Red Hat, and really about working with customers on this, on the cloud and cloud native journeys, and helping to understand what that brings to organizations and how to start making those shifts, and coupled with that, obviously bringing the point of view that we have of what hybrid cloud looks like. Thanks, Nico.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, and from myself, I've been in the IT industry far too long now, a little over 20 years. I'm currently at Ovations in the position, what they call a capability architect, and I focus on modern IT architecture, cloud adoption, DevOps, DevSecOps. So basically all the new and cool toys you can, as you can see. Yeah, so we've been helping a number of customers in the recent past to modernize their IT stacks. And what makes today quite a valuable session from our perspective is to show you how IBM and Red Hat have really come to the party to also assist you as a customer in modernizing your stacks, be it for existing IBM products, or maybe you a new customer or looking at new ways to go onto this cloud journey and what that means. So having said that, I'm just going to jump right into Ovations, who we are, what we do. So we've been around the block, as they say. So Ovations have almost been alive as long as I've been in the industry, probably. Yeah, it's almost the same length of time, so 22 years in the industry. And yeah, we've helped a lot of customers over the years. We specialize in certain areas like process automation, content services, all those kind of things. And we do have strategic partnerships with the likes of IBM and Red Hat, which have been very valuable partners over the years, as we focus on some of the core products. So our value propositions really, as I mentioned briefly, is focused around fighting financial crime, process automation, content services, and then obviously data and analytics. And then more recently, it's cloud adoption and modern IT architecture. And with that, obviously, come people and culture issues. So we play predominantly in South Africa with a number of very prominent South African enterprises, especially in the financial services industry. and insurance industry, as well as retail, and even in the mobile network operator space, we have some clients and some projects going. So we've got quite a broad base of experience and client base, and we really have a lot of very knowledgeable people who have combined many years of experience. And we hope a session like this can really help you make a decision if you're still undecided in where you need to go next for some advice or some consultation or whatever that case may be. In terms of what we are going to cover today, it's a fairly full program, but we are going to go through it fairly quickly because a lot of it, or at least the first part of it, is more background information to get us all on the same page. And then from there on, we're going to look at the more product-specific items in terms of Red Hat OpenShift and Cloud Paks. So I'm going to start by explaining just a little bit of background around the concept around cloud native and what that means, as well as the cloud native tool selection and how that works and how that typically looks like. And that is important background information that lays the foundation for the reason why an enterprise or a business customer would want to choose Red Hat OpenShift in the first place. And that will also then start to make sense as why IBM have decided to have this very close relationship with Red Hat, so close that they even bought them, right, not too long ago. And IBM Cloud Paks, as you may or may not know, is fairly reliant on OpenShift as a platform, and the reasons for that will become very apparent in this presentation. And my aim as well with this is to show you how or why it makes real good business sense to choose these partners in your IT modernization journey and cloud adoption journey. So cloud native, what is it? Well, the short answer is it depends, right? So it means typically different things to different people. However, there are basically 12, shall I call it, principles, or what they know also as factors, what kind of defines what cloud native is. Now, it's really high level and it's very conceptual. However, it becomes very real very quickly once you start to implement something using these cloud native principles or thinking. I think one of the big mistakes a lot of people make is to think about cloud native as just Kubernetes or maybe just AWS or whatever the case might be. And yes, to a very large extent, they do in their own rights apply to cloud native principles. But when you look at tooling or tool selection, they only form a small part in the entire ecosystem of tools, which we will demonstrate later. Now, to come back to what cloud native is from a product development perspective or IT perspective, you look at the 12 basic factors, starting by the code base. And it's as simple as ensuring that you have the same code base running throughout all your environments. So development, your quality assurance, and your production environments look exactly the same. They run off the exact same code base. And that's quite important because one of the big aims of DevOps and DevSecOps is to focus on automation in the provisioning of your infrastructure and also your applications. And that makes a common code base basically one of the most important starting places. In terms of dependencies, I'm not going to talk too much about that. That's just making sure that you have your dependencies declared and outside of your application, and you consume them as external resources. So be it a database, email server, or whatever the case might be. So it's really making sure that your application is decoupled from all external dependencies. Configuration management, also quite a big topic, making sure that every variable configuration item. For example, database credentials, which might be different from development to production, should be in fact. So that needs a place to live, and it needs to be secured, and there needs to be a common way that all your applications or services can consume that configuration information. So it's all about the principles around that. Backing services, also similar to dependency management, making sure that you have all your mail servers, your database servers, whatever external services that you require, that you can access them in a very decoupled fashion and consume them as just normal services. Excuse me. Build, release, run is the concept that you have a process whereby you build your application in a consistent way, and then in the release cycle, it basically, that build is combined with the configuration elements, so that when you run the application, you have the correct configuration details paired with the correct environment where it runs in. Processes is just a way of thinking about your application, which means that you have to almost think about the Unix model in the way things are running, where everything runs as a separate process. That means that in a cloud native world, you have the ability to scale, and there is a touch point in terms of concurrency, another factor, where if an application runs out of resources, we can scale that application independently and enable a lot more processes to run on the same platform. And that those individual processes might be running on different nodes, on different servers, and you don't always necessarily know where they run. That means that you have to implement your code in a certain way to make it stateless. And I'm giving you this background. It might be a bit technical, but I think it shows you that it's really about a set of principles that you have to apply your mind in terms of when you implement solutions. And I think I've covered some of the most important aspects of 12-factor application in the cloud native world, but I don't want to hammer too much on it. I think let's go on to the next slide, which kind of shows you where this fits in.
Nico, just from my side, I think if I think of sort of cloud native, I think one of sort of the key things for me is this understanding of we hear the terms cloud and cloud native, and often they're getting used together, or even as the same thing. And I think for me, it might seem a bit semantic, but it's a good idea to understand, that cloud is a destination. In the sense, it's a location. You can take an application and you can put it on a cloud. It hasn't changed the way the application functions. It hasn't changed how it scales, how it runs, how it's deployed, any of that. It's still the same as it was sitting in your data center before you moved it. Where cloud native, yes, there is components that says it goes to the cloud, but it's not dependent on a cloud location. It's taking a new approach and a new architecture, and methodology to how you build and develop applications, so that you can get the benefit of that sort of scalability and portability of what cloud brings. And I like just to differentiate between those two, because you can build entirely cloud native inside of your own data center. It's not a prerequisite to go to a public cloud to take a cloud native approach. Obviously, sort of bringing the two together is I guess really that sort of super magic, but it's sort of that separation between them.
Thanks, Andrea. And I think that is very important that you mention it. And just to emphasize, so especially if you want to become agile and adopt agile processes or agile ways of thinking and working, things like cloud native as a concept becomes very, very relevant, even as Andrew said, in your own data center. You don't have to go outside your data center to apply these principles. And in the end, what it buys you in that scenario is that it does enable you to move to the cloud so much easier the day that you do want to, pick up your technology stack and move to a public cloud service provider. And yeah, and it's all about enabling those capabilities. So thank you very much for that, Andrew. And then what makes cloud native very tricky, however, is when you start to consider how this landscape actually looks like. What does it look like when I want to move to the cloud or implement cloud native kind of thinking in application development or solution development? And luckily there is a body called the Cloud Native Compute Foundation that have started to organize all the tools into different categories. And I think one of the first mistakes a lot of people make when they venture onto this cloud journey is they might think of Kubernetes as a nice way to get into the cloud, right? However, Kubernetes, and this is the example that I've highlighted here, only fits in a very small space within the entire selection of tools that you have available. So, and more specifically, Kubernetes focus around the orchestration components, orchestration and the components around the container orchestration. So it's a very specific niche tool to satisfy a very specific task within the larger cloud native environment. And basically, as you build your application, you will need a lot of different types of these tools. And yeah, at the time when I put this slide together, as you can see on the top, there was about 1,500 different tools that you could choose from. Some of them open source, some of them commercial products, and it makes the choice quite difficult and quite intimidating, to be quite honest, especially if you haven't worked with this before. And I think that is where something like Red Hat OpenShift really starts to make a lot of sense, because Red Hat OpenShift have taken the cloud native approach in the way that they approach this whole platform. And starting from the bottom layer, it means that Red Hat OpenShift can run in many, many different places and in many different deployment scenarios. So it can run on physical infrastructure, on virtual infrastructure, in your public cloud, wherever. But the key feature here is that you have a consistent set of tools that will look and run exactly the same regardless of where you deploy it. That means if I have an OpenShift system in my data center and I spin up another OpenShift instance in Amazon Cloud, for example, or IBM Cloud, doesn't matter where, my application will run exactly the same in all these environments. And that really is very powerful. On top of that, OpenShift provides you with a base, a platform, where you can also run some of your more traditional applications, as well as your more modern cloud native applications. And of course, there's also the AI and machine learning and serverless functions capabilities that also come with Red Hat OpenShift. So it's really a very good tool to look at in terms of deploying your application on. But that is not the biggest power of Red Hat OpenShift. What it really does, or what it really gives you, is that Red Hat have selected all the components and validated all the components that you need to run proper cloud native applications in this environment. That means they have looked after things like security, networking, orchestration, etc., etc. And then it starts to make very good sense as to why somebody like IBM will select a tool like OpenShift as a platform to run their cloud packs on. Because a lot of that has already been selected, it's vetted, it's validated, it's been proven stable and enterprise ready. And to add to that, OpenShift also addresses all your DevOps pipeline concerns. So they have all the features around self-provisioning, deployment pipelines, security tooling that you can build in, things like authentication, authorization that comes out of the box that you can just hook into. So there is really a lot to gain with something like OpenShift without having to go through the trauma of trying to select all those individual tools yourself. What you get is out of the box a validated enterprise ready platform on which you can run a lot of your products. And it's basically at this point where I want to hand over to Andrew that can start to take us through the IBM Cloud Pack part of the presentation. Thank you,
Sure.
Andrew.
Thanks, Nico. And I guess before we move on, just it's really the whole I guess adding to the points about OpenShift is it's not just that pre-built and tested collection beyond just Kubernetes. It's a container orchestration platform, but more importantly, it's the patching and the enterprise hardening of those community projects into enterprise grade products. But as with any community driven open source, is what comes with the massive innovation is the very frequent release cycles. So as new things come up in these projects, there's a new version of it. And if you take that approach where you say, well, I'm going to pick this piece and this piece and this piece and this piece myself and build this, every time one of those pieces change, you then need to go and re-vet that exercise yourself to make sure that the latest version of Kubernetes works with the latest, whatever container runtime you've chosen, et cetera. I can go on with all of those pieces, and that's a big part of what Red Hat brings with OpenShift, is taking all of that, validating all of those changes to make sure that they continue to work across the stack, as well as certifying it to run on the various platforms, whether that be public hyperscalers, infrastructure sets, virtualized, virtualization providers, and so on. So it's about that continuous, process of ensuring that it is production and enterprise ready. So on that, really, what I wanted to touch on in the next slide, Nico, if you want to just jump one forward for me, is where the analysts kind of see the IBM and Open and Red Hat container platform strategy, and it looks to not only that what the current offering is as a strong offering, you can see on the y-axis, but also a very strong strategy around that, and it's really about we sort of have one statement that we use here, which is around this build once and deploy anywhere. So it's about being able to look at your landscape wherever it is, and build in a cloud native fashion, and then deploy this to where it makes most sense. In some cases that would be on-prem, in some cases that'd be in public hyperscaler. I mean, to the point where you can run OpenShift on the mainframe. There's some applications that are better suited to being in a physical data center versus a public cloud, or for whatever reasons you might have an industry regulatory reason that precludes you, or a choice that you've taken in terms of how you manage that data. But the point is, by building a platform that transcends a sort of hybrid multi-cloud environment, you can run and deploy those components wherever it best suits. and obviously allows you to take advantage of scale. And I think this, this slide really talks to that for me. It's about building a platform that really talks across any of these environments. So being able to build the packs and deploy them to where it makes sense, where that workload needs to be, and that could be in any of those environments, as I mentioned, traditional private cloud or public cloud, and being able to scale across that. Nico, thank you. And the approach that we've taken with this is really about you're looking at that infrastructure layer, but being able to almost abstract from it and say it's not the debate of which infrastructure you should be using, but that any infrastructure makes sense, built on that common platform. And then what we've taken is we've taken the IBM software product sets. So we could almost think of them as areas of functionality, and built them into the cloud packs themselves, which allow you to take advantage of these areas of focus. So if you think around things like data and AI or integration and automation, these are areas within the business that generally work together to deliver a product set and tooling set. And traditionally, these customers may have been running, let's think of something like MQ, for example, in their traditional environments on virtualized servers or physical. And now what we're saying is let's go with you on that. As you progress through your cloud and cloud native journey, where some of that may remain on-prem, some of that may be now built up, and say, how do we go and deliver this as an application? We see customer examples where they're saying they're moving a significant part of their workloads to a public cloud, but they still have the need for something like an MQ, or various other components. And how do they interact with that? This is the reason why the cloud packs exist, to give you that flexibility and scalability across the platforms. I guess additional packs in that space would be security, which I think is fairly self-explanatory. It's the IBM security set, and then we have the multi-cloud management and AI components, or I should rather say AI ops. So the multi-cloud management piece is about being aware of the idea that says we have these multiple environments, and we refer to them as multi-cloud environments, whether that once again goes back to that physical on-prem or in a public hyperscaler. And the complexity of managing that, now as you get into this world, you can no longer see where your servers are. They could be anywhere. And it's about managing that complexity around them, knowing, being able to access them in the same way, being able to manage those deployments to those environments and track those metrics. I think probably one of the really exciting announcements for me at the back end of last year was around the Watson AI Ops capability. So what we've looked at is how we bring this. Traditional IT operations is kind of always about, okay, an event has occurred, and we need to go and sort of address it. AI Ops brings in the idea of bringing what we've learned out of the data and AI space and fusing that with what we know about IT operations management, and saying, if we can, in the scenario of an event has occurred, the question is, how quickly can we find that root cause? How long does it take to get to the point of where the failure has occurred? And by being able to ingest that data that systems are creating, log files, events, alerts, and it's really about pinpointing that as quickly as possible, being able to go from hours down to minutes in a priority one outage. The savings to any organization are vast. The faster we can have our environments back up and working properly, the faster we're in business. But coupled with that is the learning that starts coming in with this, that says, as we detect more and more information and more data, it starts sort of saying, well, there's a prediction that says that these metrics may point to an outage coming forward, and being able to address that. And I think what's key about all of this is how that information is presented, and we take the approach that says we present this information where your engineers are working. So this kind of information gets presented in a Slack or a Teams, for example, where the teams can engage with it directly, see the events, go into them. That single pane of glass, I guess, that single interaction that says, this is where the event is, this is what's occurred, based on your previous ticket information, these are some of the recommendations that have been dealt with before. And really the idea of freeing up your teams to be able to tackle the bigger things. If they're not spending 6, 8, 10 hours working on outages, you have the ability to use that to deploy the new projects that's on the list, that says, how do we build more cloud native environments, or how do we deploy new projects, and balancing those pieces between the teams. Sorry, I got a little bit carried away with the AIOps part, but for me, it's really the exciting part. But so, I guess just sort of wrapping up on the cloud packs themselves, but it really is about taking that IBM software that you're familiar with, and being able to deliver it in any environment. We build it on the OpenShift platform, and the reason is simple. It's a robust, solid platform. You obfuscate the need to worry about how this interacts with various environments. The cloud packs are run and certified, supported to deliver on OpenShift, no matter where they run. So any infrastructure choice made that's supported by OpenShift supports a cloud pack, very simply, and it gives you that sort of seamless view across any of your environments and applications. And the idea is really to be able to accelerate the time to business value.
At this point, I also want to come in from an Ovations perspective and say this is exactly what we do for our customers, is we help them in this whole decision-making process, because it is a big decision that needs to be made, and you have to understand all the moving parts. And yes, you can be staring blindly at purely the numbers that's represented in cost, but there's so much more around that. And I think it's very important that we look at the whole picture. And with some of our clients, we've actually spent quite a lot of time exploring exactly these kinds of questions, and what works best and what works maybe better in some specific way. And I think what is also important to notice, it's always easy for a startup. If you're starting fresh, you have the luxury of choice of where you want to run. So in today's world, you have one of the big cloud providers to choose from, and you can basically build your whole business on that cloud platform. And in that case, it might make more sense to just use the tooling and all the products from that cloud provider. However, a lot of the enterprises out there that's been established many years, some of the big enterprises are like 50 or 100 years old already. They have a lot of legacy, and they've got big modernization programs running. And I think in that context, it's important to look at all the factors, as you have rightly pointed out. And that is, in that case, we found that something like OpenShift becomes a much easier sell then, because it addresses a lot of concern. But again, every enterprise and every business is unique, and you have to go through a process to do that assessment and to ask the questions. And that is what Ovations are there for, is to help you on that journey. Do you have any other questions? And just to summarize, so we've covered quite a lot today. We started with just building the background around what cloud native is. And for some of you, maybe it's the first time you've heard about it. I doubt it, but maybe you still have a lot of questions. maybe you're still unsure of how to approach IT modernization project, whatever the case might be. If you are in that position, please make contact with us. So we are eager to help you guys understand, what your options are and what you can do to move forward and modernize your IT stacks. And we are very happy to have partnered with the likes of IBM and Red Hat to bring really solid solutions to the table. And I think that is some of the most key partnerships that we have had over the years, and a lot of our customers are old IBM customers. So if you're looking at modernizing any of your IBM stack, please also contact us. We can really help you decide how to take that whole project or that whole concept forward, be it planning, be it maybe just an upfront assessment to understand what needs to change, whatever the case might be. We've got quite a lot of very clever people, much more clever than myself, which are all more than able to assist you in various ways with your modernization journey. Andrew, any final words from your side?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firstly, thank you very much, to Ovations for the time, and to everybody who attended. I guess if I'm going to say anything, we've covered quite a broad stroke here around sort of OpenShift and Cloud Paks, and I think if there's any areas that people are exploring in any of those components, let's sit and have the chat around those portfolios and really sort of get into the detail of what's in the integration or automation space, or inside data and AI, or what do we mean in terms of security or management portfolios, because there's so much inside all of those, and we wouldn't be able to do any kind of justice to anybody's time if we sort of went into it now. It would take us the rest of the day, I think. But yeah, and if there are any questions from anybody, please reach out and shout. That's kind of what we're here for. And once again, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, just to echo Andrew's sentiments there, thank you very much for all the people that have attended. I know time is precious these days, and we like to finish on time. So thank you for that. If you have any questions whatsoever, please reach out to us. Our email address is on the slide. It's info@ovationsgroup.com. We'll be happy to get back to you and arrange a session to address whatever questions you may have. If there are any suggestions that you want to make, if there was something that's unclear that you need more information about, or if you just have some general comments on this webinar for us, this is the first one that we have done, and we are really here to serve you as our customer community. So we would like to hear from you as well in terms of how we can improve, maybe some ideas of what you want to hear about next, or whatever the case might be. So please reach out to us, and thank you again so much for your time. I wish you all a very pleasant Wednesday, and thank you very much for attending. And yeah, I think that is it. We can basically end off here, and you guys can enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks and goodbye.